Good evening. On a trip to Germany last fall, I took advantage of an opportunity there to tape an interview with the wonderful actress Lilli Palmer, which is something you should always do if you get the chance, because she's one of the most charming, bright, and articulate women I've ever met. Wonderful actress. And that tape from Germany is the show that you're going to see tonight. By coincidence, at this very moment, Miss Palmer is passing through New York with her husband, Carlos Thompson, also a gifted writer and actor. So we're making a kind of double feature of this, and we will see tonight's tape, and then tomorrow, Lilli Palmer will be here, joined by her husband, Carlos Thompson. But first, from a studio in Berlin, here I am with the delightful Lilli Palmer. The book we mention in this conversation, by the way, is her memoir, Change Lobsters and Dance. Here we are in Berlin. Sounds like the beginning of an old vaudeville sketch. And you and I had been talking earlier about the fact that it's impossible for me to imagine New York City gone and then replaced and coming back to it. And you came back to Berlin after how many years?
20.
Yeah.
20 years later. It was strange, yes. Oh, more than strange. Because it wasn't only, you mustn't only imagine New York on the ground and rebuilt. What was much stranger, well, to meet the people. Mm-hmm. Because any waiter who would be serving me soup, I would look at him and think, soup, yes, but you're a waiter. What were you 10 years ago? Were you? Because that was only 9 years after the end of the war. So the Nazis must have been still worming all around me, and I wanted to know who was and who wasn't. But then finally I realized I can't go with a divining rod through Germany and see where it does this.
I find that I always want to ask anyone who is my age or older in Germany the same question. Is it considered the most tactless thing you can ask anyone in Germany? Where were you in Zweiten Weltkrieg,
exactly.
Second World War?
And were you a Nazi or were you a member of the party? Mm-hmm. You know, now, 30 years later, the time has come where it becomes fashionable for people to say, yes, indeed, I was a member of the party, I was this, then. But when I came back in 1954, you couldn't find a Nazi if you tried.
No one could think of the words to the Horst Wessel Lied?
No, not a thing. And truth to say, Nazis, the actual convinced ones, there was a comparatively small nucleus. All the others were just, they were running with the hare, as most people would do for good reasons. Mm-hmm. I mean, who would say, I'm going to be a refugee, and the hell with my father and mother, the hell with my wife, because I don't approve of this fellow politically? It needs a lot of moral courage to do that.
You are a star in several countries, and this was not always true with actors who came from Europe to America. It must have been psychologically devastating for some of them who were stars originally here, who then came there and played very small supporting roles.
It's quite different with me, luckily.
What made the difference between those who, as they say, made it in Hollywood and those who didn't?
Well, I had the greatest luck. I was thrown out with a great kick by Hitler, aged 18. See, I was still a child. Mm-hmm. No, not a child anymore. Grown up enough to stand on my own legs, and young enough to totally start a new life, totally, with a new language and a new country. It never occurred to me, I was in Paris then, that I wouldn't make it. I would have made it in China. You know, 18, anything happens. At least in those days, the atmosphere was different. Now they're awfully downbeat. And the happiest man I've met recently was Maurice Chevalier, age 78. He was beaming by the young people I find. I was downbeat. However, I wasn't downbeat. I thought I'll conquer France. I didn't. I had to admit defeat after a year. I'll conquer England. Well, I did very, very gradually. Then I went to America, but then I was already married, and there were two of us. My first husband and I. It was easier.
Where were you booted out of Germany, as you said?
I was booted out, aged 18, from my very first theatrical engagement, a town called Darmstadt. Under rather dramatic circumstances, I was on the stage, and there were so-called demonstrations. Supposedly, they were to happen the moment I appeared, because I was a menace to people, not being of Aryan descent. People were a menace. And as I was getting on the stage, I wasn't sure whether they were going to jump up, which they did in those days, and hit me or beat me up and take me away to what was then known euphemistically as protective custody.
Oh, yes, to protect them from the other parts of society.
Well, it's a long story why this didn't happen. I was lucky enough, terrified as I was on the stage and watching out. It didn't happen, but I decided that night, out. Mm-hmm. And out I went to Paris, where I sang in nightclubs and in a brothel. Well, I found out it was a brothel upstairs. And where we were singing...
By walking upstairs and suddenly seeing something you're not supposed to see at that age?
That's
right.
As
I recall from your book.
That's right. My sister and I, we were an act.
Or at least in those days at that age.
That's right. We sang Wien, Wien, nur du allein. Terrible Austrian schmaltz. Mm. And then one night I had a headache and wanted to lie down, and upstairs I found there were rooms. So we found out it was a brothel upstairs.
Your father, who was, I believe, still alive at that point, would have been horrified and come personally to get you, wouldn't he, if he had known?
Oh, yes. He mercifully died. Mm-hmm. As he was a surgeon, as most surgeons died in those days, of immediate heart attack. And so he would have made a bad refugee. Yeah. So I was totally free to make myself a new life, and I did.
It's ironic, isn't it, that his war record in the First World War, I think, was partly what saved you from worse trouble. Because...
the Iron Cross.
He had the Iron Cross.
Yes, otherwise they would have beaten me up on that stage. But their commander, the commander of this troop that was detailed to take me into protective custody, was told at the last moment that my father had been in front of Verdun and had received an Iron Cross. Ironic, because he hardly ever in his life referred to it. Mm-hmm. But it was so.
And if he had lived to see Germany defeated, would that have killed him?
He would have had some very ambiguous, like most German Jews who loved their country, would have had some very ambiguous feelings about it. Now, I'm going to brag.
Okay.
4 years ago, the president of the Federal Republic of Germany hung around my chicken neck whatever it is, the biggest decoration that a woman can get in Germany. Mm-hmm. And as the cameras were turning and we were doing this, I said to Mr. President, what am I getting this for? And he whispered back, I haven't the faintest idea, he said. But anyway, all that I was thinking of as he was doing it was my father. Mm-hmm. What he would have said. To see that cross, of the Order of Merit, of whatever it is, the German Order of Merit hung around my neck.
Do you think that would have made up for your becoming an actress in his mind?
Yes, he didn't like the idea. He thought I should become a surgeon, too, like him. He said, it won't be enough for you later on, and he was absolutely right. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, and it isn't enough for me, and I do a lot of other things, too.
Yes, you referred to someone earlier who, before we were on the air, who said that it's a famous star, who said that it's enough to be perfect in your profession. If you do that, everything else will be excused.
Yeah, it was my first husband who said that.
Oh, yes.
But I don't agree. I think it is marvelous to have other fish to fry, other territories to conquer.
And you can live without acting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frankly, this is absolutely a fallacy that one needs the sound of applause. That's a lot of balls. Nonsense. That's I don't believe in it. Yes. You don't need that at all.
That would be how far down your list of things that are essential?
Well, if you would say to me, you must never act again, I think I could survive. But if you would say to me, you would never read a book again, you would never paint a picture again, you'd never hear any music again, I think I'd give up and shrivel.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about the time you went to California, went to Hollywood. Were the American stars at that time known to you as a kid in Europe? Do you know what I mean? Were they legends to you then?
Of course. My adoration, aged 11, was Gary Cooper. And he freed me from my passion for my history mistress, whom I adored. I suddenly see in Gary Cooper and Marlene Dietrich, he kissed her on the mouth, and that's why it was not allowed for children under 18 to enter.
In Morocco?
In Morocco.
Yeah.
I remember this. He kissed her to my intense satisfaction. And I thought, well, maybe it's not that bad to be kissed by a man, you know. Mm-hmm. And I fell madly in love with him and my very first partner. Sounds like a silly story, isn't it? Mm-hmm. My first American film was Gary Cooper.